The story begins with the birth of a boy who was different from the very first second he entered the world. Inside the delivery room, the medical staff suddenly panicked during what should have been a routine birth. Something was clearly wrong with the infant as he began to shiver and hide his face from the light. Instead of crying like a normal newborn, he remained eerily silent while the doctors scrambled to find a cause. When a doctor leaned in to check his vitals, the close contact triggered an intense wave of panic in the child. His breathing became ragged as the presence of other people felt like a direct assault on his senses. As the years passed, Junpei continued to struggle, choosing to hide in boxes rather than play with other children. This crippling social anxiety would eventually define his entire existence. He was essentially a natural-born goner. From a young age, his social skills were completely non-existent. This didn't change as he became an adult. He structured his entire life around his bedroom, working and shopping online to avoid the outside world. He even completed his education through remote learning. Human contact was something he avoided at all costs. Eventually, he found a new escape. He became completely obsessed with a popular mobile game. It was a classic fantasy setting filled with magic and monsters. Junpei wasn't just a casual player, though. He grinded until he was ranked 95th across every server as a top-tier summoner. Being a summoner meant he never had to talk to anyone. He could manifest his own party of monsters to handle everything solo. He spent his nights fueled by energy drinks, chasing the top spot. He was finally on the verge of becoming the world's best. Junpei Yamagishi was currently on day 4 of a brutal all-nighter, pushing himself through sheer willpower to reach the top. He only needed one more rare summon to complete his ultimate party and become the best player in the world. To finish the grind, he planned to skip sleep for another 2 nights, fueling his body with even more energy drink. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. The inhuman effort was finally catching up to him. He realized something was seriously wrong as his vision blurred and his chest tightened. With one final collapse, his body gave out, and he crashed onto the floor of his messy room. Junpei Yamagishi was dead at 28. The official cause was listed as heart failure from excessive gaming. However, his story was far from over. He slowly opened his eyes, waking up in a strange bed with a massive headache. He clutched his head, wondering if he finally hit his limit after 4 days of non-stop gaming. His first instinct was to jump back into the grind, but he stopped when he felt a strange sensation. This wasn't his messy room, but a clean infirmary filled with empty beds and bright sunlight. As he reached up, he felt something cold on his face, discovering a strange, ornate eye patch he didn't recognize. The confusion turned into full-blown panic as he scrambled out of bed, looking for an exit. He rushed over to the window to see where he had been taken. The view outside was impossible, showing a medieval town square teeming with wagons, knights, and literal dwarves. The reality finally hit him, as he realized the world of his favorite game was now his actual life. He stared at the crowd below, spotting lizardmen and dwarves. Everything looked exactly like the game he spent his entire life playing. Catching his reflection, he realized he was now his own game character. This was cool, but he didn't have time for a nap if he wanted to hit rank 1. Suddenly, the clinic caretaker walked in, greeting him with a warm smile. She was relieved to see him finally awake. But for Junpei, this was a total disaster. He scrambled across the floor, trying to put as much distance between them as possible. To a normal person, this was just a friendly visit. But Junpei had a massive issue with his personal space. He needed a 3-meter buffer zone just to function. If a stranger got any closer, his lungs would literally lock up from the sheer anxiety. The caretaker didn't understand his trauma and reached out to comfort him. She patted his shoulders, unaware that her kindness was basically torture. His vision blurred as the panic took over. He couldn't breathe, and there was no way to escape this social nightmare. The lady explained he was found unconscious in the forest. She assumed he was just feeling sick, but for Junpei, her presence was the real danger. He tried to convince himself this was all a fever dream. If he just stayed calm, maybe he would finally wake up back in his room. But the nightmare only got worse. The caretaker leaned in close, complimenting his face while Junpei's entire body shook from the social overload. Without warning, she shoved a glass of water against his lips. He could barely breathe, let alone swallow. She mentioned he didn't have any physical wounds. Still, she had already used healing magic on him just to be safe. Then the conversation took a weirdly modern turn. She casually asked if he had any medical insurance. Junpei froze, wondering what she was even talking about. He was in a fantasy world, yet he still couldn't escape the reality of bills. Seeing his blank expression, she asked for his ID. Since he was a total stranger with nothing to his name, this stay was about to get very expensive. That cost was a reality Junpei wasn't ready to face. He was desperate for this to be a dream, praying he would just wake up in his own bed already. The caretaker tried to be sweet, but her kindness felt like a death sentence. To someone with his level of social anxiety, being this close to a stranger was absolute torture. She finally left, giving him some space to breathe. He decided his only move was to go back to sleep, hoping he would wake up back in the game he actually controlled. Morning came, but the world had not changed. He was still stuck in this fantasy infirmary, and the nightmare was far from over. Sleeping it off had not worked. To make matters worse, his avatar's body was now screaming for food. He headed to the front desk, where the caretaker was waiting for him. She seemed friendly enough, but the vibe was about to shift. Then she dropped the bombshell. Since he did not have insurance, the total for his stay came out to 70,000 gal. Her smile did not reach her eyes as she realized the truth. Junpei did not have a single coin to his name. The panic was setting in. He was stuck in a world he didn't understand with a massive debt he couldn't pay. He imagined himself out in the wilderness, already feeling the soul-crushing weight of manual labor. It felt unfair. He was supposed to be a legendary hero, not a part-time worker inside a dream. Back at the desk, the caretaker started listing off some local job openings to help him clear his balance. But for someone with his level of social anxiety, every single option looked like a total nightmare. Then he spotted a flyer for herb gathering. It was the perfect solo mission for a shut-in like him. The lady was confused. She didn't understand why a high-level summoner would want such a basic task. She pointed to his gear, explaining that his legendary equipment made his secret identity pretty obvious. She explained that summoners were actually considered the weakest class around. Junpei started to sweat as he asked if there was a problem. His worst fears were confirmed when she admitted they were totally useless. This was the one thing he hoped had changed in this reality. Back in the game, the summoner class was a total meme that everyone avoided. The forums were full of reviews calling it a complete waste of a party slot. Junpei only reached the top because he spent years of his life and his entire bank account on the grind. He was a shut-in who turned a trash class into a legend through pure obsession. The lady handed him a flyer, suggesting he start with herb gathering since it was not dangerous. It felt exactly like the low-level tutorials from his past life. Then she offered to write him a recommendation for a busy cafeteria. She promised the staff was friendly and that he would fit right in before he knew it. Junpei immediately rejected the idea. To someone with his level of anxiety, a job surrounded by happy, social people was a total death sentence. She did not take no for an answer and started shoving even more options in his face. Every single job was in a bright and happy workplace, which was Junpei's literal nightmare. He grabbed the herb gathering flyer and made a run for it before she could suggest anything else. The caretaker tried to call him back, but Junpei was already deep in the woods, finally enjoying the silence. After walking for a while, he found a river and decided it was the perfect spot for a breather. As he leaned over the water, he finally got a good look at his new reflection. It was still hard to believe he was actually living inside the high-level avatar he used for years. Back in his old life, he was just a shut-in, but here he was actually really handsome. He remembered spending hours in the character creator, even making sure the eye patch looked legendary. However, as he admired his gear, a sudden realization hit him about his current situation. If his avatar's looks were this perfect, his broken abilities had to be real too. Since he was finally alone, he let his inner gamer take over. He had the legendary odd eyes and the ultimate character design. If the gear was the real deal, he should be able to use his high-level skills. It was time to see if he could still call his summons. He started overthinking his next move, debating between his strongest boss killer or a flying mount to carry him home. He raised his staff and commanded his nightmare dragon to appear. This was supposed to be his big hero moment. But as the silence dragged on, the hype quickly died out. Absolutely nothing happened. He realized the gear was just a high-quality costume. He looked like a god, but he did not have a drop of actual power. Defeated, he started the long walk back. He just wanted to go home and play a game that actually worked. He checked his flyer against a nearby plant, confirming it was the medicinal herb he needed. Gathering them was his only option now. He finished filling his bag, but a sudden rustling sound from the trees caught his attention. A small, green creature stepped out from the shadows, brandishing a rusty blade. It was an actual monster. Junpei realized he was facing a goblin. Without his high-level abilities, even a low-level mob was a total death sentence. Standing right there was an actual goblin. In the game, this was just a weak early-game mob, but in real life, things felt way different. Junpei could not believe he was expected to kill a living thing. He held his legendary staff, but he had never actually used it in a real fight. He realized that a summoner who could not summon was basically worthless. Without his magic, he was even lower than a common monster. This was not a game anymore. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. Taking a life was not going to be simple. Suddenly, the goblin lunged forward with its rusty blade. Junpei let out a shout as the creature flew through the air toward his throat. The monster stumbled and hit the dirt, narrowly missing its target. Junpei stood there in shock, his heart pounding against his chest. He looked down and saw a deep gash on his finger. The pain was real, and blood was already dripping down the length of his staff. Pure survival instinct finally kicked in. Junpei turned his back and sprinted into the forest, desperate to put distance between himself and the monster. Junpei panicked as the world around him began to blur. He had no idea what was happening. A sharp pain shot through his hand. It hurt like hell, and blood was already starting to pool around his grip. This was not a dream. He was terrified that he was actually going to die before his journey even started. The goblin lunged through the air with its blade held high. It was moving in for the kill. Before the monster could strike, Junpei was transported into a dark void. A mysterious gacha machine stood in front of him, offering one free pull. He stared at the glowing screen in total shock. His mind was racing to process the sudden change. It looked like a retro card machine from his old world. This was a Summon Beast gacha, and it was likely his only way out. He looked around the empty room, still shaking. Only a moment ago, he was about to be killed in the forest. A mysterious voice suddenly echoes through the void, asking if he has the will to fight. Junpei can barely process what is happening. The voice tells him to pull the gacha if he wants to survive. He looks around the dark room, searching for the source of the sound. He stares at the retro machine in disbelief. It seems his entire life now depends on the results of a single pull. He thinks back to his gaming days. Usually, a 10 pull guarantees at least one high-rank unit to carry the team. A rank B summon would easily crush that goblin back in the forest. He reaches for the handle, hoping for a miracle. A notification pops up displaying the brutal drop rates. The odds for a legendary pull are basically zero. Junpei panics when he realizes he only gets one single pull. This is not the lucky start he was counting on. He questions why the system is being so stingy with the rewards. He just has to hope even a weak summon is enough to save him. He stares at the screen, calculating his odds. The machine shows a 55% chance for an E rank. He just needs anything better than the absolute bottom tier. He grips the handle and prays for a miracle. He keeps telling himself that an E rank will be enough. The machine spits out a card. It is Undyne, an F rank water spirit. His worst fear is now a reality. A mysterious voice echoes through the dark void. It tells the summoner he must fight if he wants to reach the top. The voice promises another pull in the future, but Junpei screams for a redo right now. He knows an F rank summon is basically a death sentence. Before he can argue, the void disappears. He is teleported right back into the forest where the goblin is still waiting for him. There is no more running away. He is back in the real world and the monster is ready to finish the job. He knows his life is on the line and there is no more time to hesitate. He raises his staff and calls out for his only summon to appear. He slams his staff down and shouts the name of his new partner. A magic circle glows as the summoning is finally complete. It is the F-rank water spirit, Undyne. She looks up with a bright smile and innocent eyes. She looks more like a mascot than a warrior. Bro, this is actually the only good thing we've found in this manga. The tiny spirit hops onto his head and settles in. Junpei cannot believe how cute his first summon is. The reality of the situation hits him as he spots the monster nearby. He ducks behind a tree to hide. He trembles in fear while his new spirit remains calm. He realizes even a low-level mob is a nightmare in this world. The goblin screams and charges across the forest floor. It holds its blade high for a killing blow. Undyne launches herself toward the enemy to protect her master. The desperate fight for survival starts now. The goblin is furious, but the little water spirit does not back down as she stands her ground. The monster lashes out with its blade, aiming to slice the spirit right out of the air. Junpei panics and screams her name, certain that his only summon is about to be destroyed. The blade cuts straight through her body, but instead of dying, her liquid form simply ripples and starts to pull itself back together. Seeing her reform instantly, Junpei realizes the mechanics of this world are far more advanced than the game he used to play. A sudden realization hits him as he analyzes how the spirit reacted to the physical strike. Since she is a water spirit, slashing attacks are basically useless, which means her starting skill might actually be effective. He stops hiding and commands Undyne to use her water cutter ability to finally strike back. The water blade slices through the air and connects. Junpei gasps as he realizes the attack actually landed. But his hope disappears instantly. The strike barely left a mark and the damage is honestly pathetic. He remembers the warnings from his gaming days. Summoners were always considered a cursed class because the early levels are a total nightmare. This reality is much more brutal than any screen. Undyne continues to struggle. Her tiny attacks are doing absolutely nothing to stop the creature. Junpei watches the lopsided fight with wide eyes. He knows he should jump in and help her, but the fear is paralyzing. The goblin is furious now. It lets out a blood-curdling scream as it prepares its next move. He is completely frozen. The thought of getting close to that blade is just too much for him to handle. Time is running out. Even though she can reform her body, Undyne is clearly starting to reach her limit. Junpei realizes that if his only summon falls, he is the next target. He has to find a solution before the goblin finishes them both. He frantically scans the forest for an advantage. There has to be something in the environment he can use to turn the tide. An idea clicks and he grabs the tiny spirit before making a dash through the trees. He needs to lure the monster to a specific location. He glances down at Undyne and sees she is barely holding on. Her health is critical, and she cannot take another hit. They finally reach the bank of a nearby river. He splashes into the water, hoping his memory of the game mechanics is accurate. If this world really follows the same rules as his old life, then the terrain is about to change everything. He raises his staff and commands her to use Water Cutter one more time. He is betting his life on her hidden passive ability. A massive surge of energy erupts from the river. In this water terrain, even an F-rank spirit receives a massive stat boost. The water blade slams into the goblin, finally dealing a massive blow. The terrain boost turned a weak skill into a deadly weapon. The monster falls back, clutching its chest in pain. It is weakened, but the danger is not over yet. Junpei knows he cannot rely on magic alone to end this. He grabs a heavy rock and stands over the fallen creature. His vision blurs as panic sets in. He tells himself he must kill the goblin now, or he will be the one who dies. He lets out a primal scream and slams the stone down with everything he has left. The struggle ends in an instant. The forest goes quiet as the monster stops moving forever. The weight of his actions finally breaks him. Junpei falls to his knees and weeps, while Undyne stares at the man who just took a life. After the nightmare in the forest, Junpei finally reached the safety of a nearby town. He stumbled through the streets, barely able to keep his balance while the locals watched him in confusion. His vision was blurring from the massive blood loss. Every step felt like he was about to pass out. The trauma of his first kill haunted him. He just wanted to go home and play games, but that old life was gone forever. He wondered if there was a safer way to survive in this world, but something suddenly caught his eye. Up ahead, a knight was dragging a crying man through the dirt. This city was not the peaceful paradise it looked like. The man begged for mercy over a small debt, but the knights only cared about his lack of duty to the country. As they dragged him away to a life of slave labor, Junpei realized that being weak here was a fate worse than death. The knights shouted that protection was only for those who followed the rules. To them, debt was a crime punishable by total loss of freedom. Junpei realized that missing a few payments meant a life of slavery. This country was completely insane. He eventually found a clinic as the sun began to set. A voice from inside asked if he was there for medical treatment. He stepped in and asked for the old woman who helped him before. The new nurse told him to hurry because they were closing. She placed her hands over his injuries and cast a healing spell. A warm glow covered his skin and began to mend the damage. He looked down and saw his finger was completely reattached. The nurse warned him to take it easy while the bone finished healing. Just as he started to feel relieved, she handed him a stack of paperwork. He was totally confused by the sudden change in vibe. She explained that she heard about him from Ada. Now he needed to sign insurance forms and register with the guild to get a legal ID. The nurse explains that signing up for insurance is his best move. If he joins now, his copay for today's medical treatment will only be 30%. But there is a dark side to this system. If he fails to pay back his debts, the state will seize him and turn him into a slave laborer to cover the costs. This world is completely unforgiving. Junpei realizes he is already buried under a massive debt of 98,000 gale. He sits on his clinic bed and tries to do the math. Between the insurance fees, food, and rent, his small reward for gathering herbs will not even cover the basics. He collapses onto the mattress in total despair. Back in his old life, he would be finishing a high-level raid with his dream team right now. The harsh reality of his new life finally sets in. He starts to realize that he might never get to hold a controller or play a video game ever again. There is no internet and no computers here. He honestly wonders how shut-ins even survive in a world with zero entertainment. He rolls around on the bed, wishing he could just go home. He is missing out on pre-ordered sequels and special gaming events that are now gone forever. To Junpei, a world without video games is a total nightmare. He decides that he cannot give up just yet. He has to find a purpose in this place. He sneaks out of the clinic through the back exit to avoid being spotted by the staff. Before he can do anything else, he needs to get a legal ID from the Adventurers Guild. His plan is simple. He will find a job he can do alone and slowly pay back every cent of his debt. He pulls his hood down, promising himself that he will eventually find a way back home. Suddenly, he realizes a major flaw in his plan. This guild never existed in his favorite game, so he has no map to follow. After searching the streets for a while, he finally finds a massive building with a grand clock tower. It turns out the guild is only a 10-minute walk from the clinic. He takes a deep breath and prepares to step inside. Even though the guild was nearby, Junpei spent way too much time wandering the streets because he only had vague directions. He knew he could have saved time by asking for help, but he simply could not bring himself to do it. His social anxiety was a massive hurdle, but he forced himself to stay focused on the mission. As he pushed open the heavy doors, he realized how much easier life was back home with a map app on his phone. The guild hall was packed with powerful adventurers and strange beast men from every corner of the world. Seeing the massive crowd immediately sent Junpei into a state of total panic. He tried to take deep breaths and mask his presence to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. He eventually spotted the reception desk and realized he finally had to talk to someone to get his legal ID. Junpei takes a deep breath and tries to psych himself up for the encounter. But the social pressure is too much, so he decides to just wait and observe the situation for a while. An entire hour passes by and his social anxiety still has him glued to the same spot. He desperately wishes he could just use a messaging app instead of having to speak to a real person. Suddenly, he realizes he can just write his request on a piece of paper to avoid the awkward talking entirely. Just as he prepares to make his move, he notices a strange shift in the atmosphere around him. He realizes that his attempts to stay invisible have completely failed, and everyone is looking his way. A loud adventurer suddenly slams a hand on his shoulder and asks if he is the new rookie in town. The loud adventurer explains that his group is currently looking for a mage and asks if Junpei is down to join their party. Before he can even process the offer, a buff warrior nearby tells the guy to take a closer look at the weapon Junpei is holding. She quickly identifies the star-shaped tool as an apprentice summoner staff. The man is completely shocked by the discovery because he has never actually seen a real summoner in person before. Word spreads fast through the guild hall, and the other adventurers start gossiping about how summoners are just weak washouts who cannot use real magic. The crowd gets even nastier, calling him pure trash and claiming he will be dead in no time since no one would ever want to party with his kind. The two adventurers just laugh at his expense, mockingly wondering how long a weakling like him will even last in this world. Trapped by the overbearing crowd and a barrage of insults, Junpei reaches his breaking point and is on the verge of passing out right where he stands. Suddenly, a guild staff member steps in. She orders the bullies to stop causing trouble and leave the other adventurers alone. The loud man just laughs it off. He brushes her off by claiming his voice is just naturally loud and easy for everyone to hear. Ignoring the man, the woman turns her attention directly to Junpei. She asks if he is the one named Junpei. The question hits him like a truck. He has been trying so hard to stay invisible, but this total stranger knows exactly who he is. His heart begins to race as he stares at her. He has never met this woman before and has no idea how she discovered his identity. The receptionist hands Junpei a registration form to officially join the guild. He stands at the counter surrounded by veteran adventurers and massive beastmen. His heart starts racing when the woman asks him to step a bit closer. Even a simple conversation feels like a life or death situation. To his surprise, she already knows his name. She mentions that Ada from the clinic told her all about him. Junpei flashes back to the kind woman who cared for him after he collapsed. It seems his reputation is already spreading through the town. He looks at the paper and sees sections for his name, age, and preferred magic weapon. A strange realization hits him as he stares at the page. The letters are not Japanese, but his mind translates the ancient script instantly. He starts writing with a quill and ink. This world gave him the innate ability to understand and write a language he has never studied. The seasoned warriors in line behind him start shouting for him to move faster. The social pressure from the angry crowd sends Junpei into a total state of panic. The receptionist finishes checking his paperwork. Junpei is still a nervous wreck, bowing repeatedly just to get through the interaction. But the process isn't over yet. She politely asks to see his face for identity verification. Junpei completely freezes. This is officially his worst nightmare coming true. She insists he only needs to lower his hood for a second. He panics, wondering if she plans to take a magic photo or something similar. The nearby adventurers start heckling him, demanding he show his face. Junpei is at his breaking point, begging the crowd to just leave him alone. Typically, the guild is a place for freelancers where skill is the only thing that matters. Identity checks like this aren't even part of the standard rules. So why is she being so insistent? To find the answer, the story shifts back to the previous day. It all started when Ada, the clinic caretaker, reached out to her neighbor to share some interesting news. Aunt Ada approached Rose at the guild to ask for a major favor. She explained that a new summoner was coming to register and promised he was a total babe. Back in the present, Rosa remembers the gossip and gets curious about the man standing before her. Meanwhile, the rowdy crowd keeps shouting at him to stop hiding under his cloak. Junpei realizes he is cornered and slowly reaches up to grab his hood. He finally pulls it back, revealing features so perfect they belong on a magazine cover. The rude adventurers instantly shut up as they realize the rookie is actually a top-tier hottie. The guild hall goes quiet, and even the staff can only stare while Junpei waits for the nightmare to end. The receptionist is paralyzed by his appearance. He has striking red eyes and silver hair that makes him look like a literal top model. She is completely lost in his looks. In her head, she is already deciding that he is the only man for her. Junpei is having a total internal meltdown. He thinks the silence means something is wrong or that everyone is judging him. He quickly pulls his hood back over his head. He desperately hopes that the quick face check was enough to end this social torture. The receptionist finally snaps back to reality and tells him to wait for his license. She suggests he check the quest board while she handles the paperwork. Junpei looks at the available jobs but feels discouraged. Most of these monsters look way too powerful for him to handle alone. He finally finds one flyer that looks manageable for a beginner. It is the only option that does not feel like a suicide mission. He decides to take on a goblin extermination quest. He knows one mistake could be fatal, but he has to start his journey somewhere. Before he can set foot in the forest, he needs to finish his registration. The receptionist hands him a small card, officially making him an F-rank adventurer. But the process is not over yet. The staff member insists on giving him a quick breakdown of how the guild actually operates. Just like the games he used to play, adventurers are ranked from F all the way up to S. As a newcomer, he has to start at the very bottom of the food chain. Promotions are not free. He has to earn points by finishing quests and bringing back mana stones, a detail that catches him off guard since it was never in the original game. As his rank increases, he will gain access to more dangerous and profitable missions. Junpei listens intently, knowing his survival depends on these rules. He can't afford to walk into the wild being clueless. He speaks up to ask for more information about what these mana stones actually are. She explains that these gems are found inside the bodies of monsters. They are essentially crystallized magical power, and the guild is willing to pay good money for them. With the explanation finished, Junpei is finally ready to move. The paperwork is done, and his journey into the world of monsters is about to begin. The receptionist looks down at the quest flyer Junpei picked out. She is surprised he chose a goblin extermination for his very first job. She immediately voices her concerns. For a solo summoner, leaving the safety of the city walls is basically a death wish, so she suggests he find a party to join. The mere thought of social interaction sends Junpei into a total state of shock. To a former shut-in, working with strangers is scarier than any monster. He refuses the offer instantly. He tells her he will be just fine working alone as he grips the paperwork with trembling hands. The receptionist wants to push harder, but she stops herself. She worries that being too bossy will make her look like a clingy and annoying woman in his eyes. Instead, she gives him one last stern warning. Goblins are dangerous and have killed many solo summoners who underestimated them. Junpei finally manages to escape the social pressure and heads out into the busy city streets. His first real mission is finally happening. As he walks away, the veteran adventurers from earlier watch him go. They are curious to see if the handsome rookie actually makes it back from the forest alive. The veterans can't help but shout some last words as he leaves. They tell him to stay alive and return in one piece. Junpei moves deep into the wild. Ahead, a massive claw-shaped mountain pierces the sky above the dark forest. He finds a quiet spot and readies his staff. It is time to test his power. He speaks the word to activate his ability. In a burst of energy, Undyne appears. She is a tiny water spirit, but she is the only thing standing between him and certain death. Junpei kneels to check her status. She is fully healed and ready for action. He makes sure to thank her for saving him during his first day in this world. The atmosphere turns serious as they enter the woods. He tells Undyne to pay close attention. This is not a game anymore. He starts to lay out the plan for their first real hunt. Success is the only option. Yesterday was a total blur of survival. Now that he has a moment to breathe, the forest feels different. Something about the way Undyne follows him catches his attention. He feels a literal thread of magic linking them together. This is not just a game mechanic, it is a physical sensation deep in his chest. Undyne suddenly freezes and looks toward the thicket. Before he can react, she pulls him behind a tree to keep him out of sight. He holds his breath, praying his nerves do not give him away. Just a few yards away, a pair of goblins are busy sharpening their blades. Fighting two at once is a suicide mission. He is not ready for those odds yet. They need to find a single target. It is time to get out of there before they are spotted. Once they are safe, Junpei finally lets out a breath. That was way too close. He realizes he can't count on monsters being alone. Weak creatures usually stay in packs to survive. A sudden snap from the thicket puts him on high alert. Goblins are not the only threat in these woods. If he runs into a high-level boss right now, it is game over. He is still just a rookie. A small animal jumps out, but Junpei is already a nervous wreck. Every little sound feels like a death flag. He pulls Undyne close for a bit of comfort. Right now, she is the only thing keeping him sane. He looks down at his tiny companion and feels a wave of shame. He thinks he is pathetic for relying so much on her. Even without words, the connection between them is undeniable. He can feel her desire to protect him. For the first time, he offers her a sincere thank you. It is time to get back to the mission and try again. After searching the woods, he finally spots a potential target. There is a lone goblin just ahead. It is separated from the pack and completely distracted. He grips his staff, trying to steady his nerves. They just have to stick to the plan. He makes his move, signaling Undyne to strike with her water cutter. A stray goblin gets blasted by a sudden burst of water before it can even finish its meal. The monster quickly realizes it is under attack and narrows its eyes at the source. With a low growl, the creature charges forward, swinging its rusty knife in a blind rage. Junpei does not hesitate. He turns around and starts to run for his life. He knows a head-on fight is suicide. Even against the weakest monsters, Undyne might not survive a direct clash. To win this, he has to be smart. He decides to lure the beast away from the dense trees. He leads the monster into a wide-open field where they can finally use the environment to their advantage. This is the moment. He orders Undyne to target the legs with a water slash, catching the goblin completely off guard. Undyne moves instantly, focusing her power for the strike. The blade of water cuts deep into the monster's leg, tearing through its skin. Junpei smiles, convinced that he has secured his very first victory. However, the goblin is not finished. It ignores the injury and leaps directly at his throat. The creature pins him to the ground and raises a rusty blade. Junpei can only scream in terror. The reality of this world finally sinks in. One mistake here means certain death. He desperately orders Undyne to attack again, but she is standing too far away to help. Junpei remembers that the water slash has a 6-second cooldown in the game. He has to survive until her magic is ready. The 6 seconds finally pass, and Undyne unleashes her water slash once more. The blade of water tears into the goblin from behind, breaking its focus. Junpei lets out a terrified scream. He is no longer playing a game, and the weight of his own mortality is starting to crush him. Driven by pure survival instinct, he lashes out and sinks a blade into the monster's throat. It is a messy, desperate strike that catches the beast off guard. The goblin collapses as blood sprays across the field. Junpei continues to shout, his adrenaline masking the fact that the fight is already over. Minutes later, the silence of the woods returns. Junpei sits by the water, trembling as he realizes how close he came to meeting his end. He planned to keep his distance and chip away at a health bar, but reality is far more brutal than a screen. One small mistake almost cost him everything. Undyne notices his distress and moves closer, gently patting his back to offer some small comfort to her shaken master. He finally calms down and returns the gesture with a head pat. He tells her she did a great job, knowing he would be dead without her. Now it was time to get down to business. The guild quest required a goblin ear as proof of the kill, and he could not leave without it. Junpei pulled out a small blade and asked Undyne to keep watch while he worked. The sound of the knife was sickening, and he struggled to keep his composure. He finally managed to secure the ear, but the worst part was still ahead. The receptionist mentioned a magic stone was located somewhere in the chest cavity. His stomach did backflips as the smell of iron filled his nose, making him gag uncontrollably. The sight was pure nightmare fuel. This was nothing like the clean loot drops in a video game. The gore is too much for his modern stomach. Junpei doubles over and loses his lunch as the stench of the goblin corpse fills the air. He forces himself to finish the job. With shaking hands and tears in his eyes, he finally secures the proof he needs. In his palm sits a small glowing crystal. This is the magic stone he had to dig out of the monster's chest. Despite the horror, he wonders how much it is actually worth. It is a beautiful gem for something that came from such a foul creature. The reality of the situation hits him hard. He misses his old life and wants nothing more than to be a shut-in again, where things aren't this messy. But he can't go back. He needs money for food and a place to sleep. His mounting debts won't pay themselves. Junpei wipes the sweat from his face and steels his resolve. He tells Undyne it is time to find their next target. As they walk, he tries to make sense of this world. It feels like a video game, but the locations are all wrong. If the logic holds, he just needs to level up his summons to survive. But survival requires more than just levels. Junpei realizes he is still lacking critical information about how this world works. He decides to find a library as soon as he gets back to town. Suddenly, a strange shimmering light appears right beside him. He stops in his tracks and looks around the empty trail. Undyne is nowhere to be found. He calls out her name in confusion, realizing his only source of protection has completely vanished into thin air. Junpei freezes in total shock. His only source of protection just vanished into thin air without warning. Desperate to get her back, he raises his staff and tries to force a new summon immediately. The magic fails. Instead of a spirit appearing, a wave of pure agony hits him. He hits the dirt, clutching his skull as it feels like it is splitting wide open. This was never an issue back in the game. Reality is playing by much harsher rules than he expected. He finally realizes the problem. Every summon requires a massive amount of mana just to call forth. Once they are in the world, his magic continues to drain every single second to keep them there. In the virtual world, he had thousands of potions to stay fueled, but here he is running on empty. Junpei realizes he is completely out of mana. Without potions to refill his tank, he is basically powerless. Natural recovery is a slow process, and he has no clue how long he will be stuck in this weakened state. Suddenly, a noise in the brush makes his heart stop. A goblin is lurking nearby. He cannot fight without his summons. If that monster spots him, he is as good as dead. Junpei forces his heavy legs to move, knowing he needs to reach the town immediately. The creature stays focused on its own task, unaware that a potential target is slipping away. His breath comes in ragged gasps as he pushes his body past its absolute limit. Finally, the massive stone gates of the city appear. He actually made it back alive. He was lucky to be alive. That first encounter was way more dangerous than any video game he had ever played. He heads straight to the guild to turn in his proof of the kill. The receptionist prepares the payment for his first successful quest. The total comes to 8,000 gal for the goblin and its magic stone. At this rate, he only needs 15 more kills to clear his massive debt. But as he counts the coins on the tray, something is wrong. The pile is significantly smaller than it should be. It turns out this world has taxes too. The guild automatically takes a 10% cut right off the top of every reward. The receptionist is just relieved he made it back in one piece. She suggests he should stick to safer jobs inside the city walls for now. She thinks he would be better off babysitting or working in a retail shop. Junpei realizes his anxious personality is already giving him away. Before he can leave, she even offers to show him around town on her day off. This world might be brutal, but some people are surprisingly friendly. Junpei wraps things up at the guild and heads straight for the clinic. He still owes money for the care he received after collapsing and wants to settle his tab. Even though he is a high-level summoner, his social anxiety is still winning. He lingers at the entrance, peeking through the door to make sure the coast is clear. The clinic lobby is busy with other patients today. Junpei scans the room for Ada, but she is nowhere to be found at the front desk. Suddenly, a voice speaks right into his ear. Ada has appeared right behind him, giving him the absolute fright of his life. She is just relieved to see that he managed to survive his first day in the forest. Junpei is still a complete mess, looking totally drained of energy. He pulls out his small bag of coins and tries to pay for his medical treatment. He wants to clear his debt as fast as possible so he can focus on leveling up. Ada smiles and says she will take 5,000 gal for her services. She tells him he should keep the tiny bit of change left for his daily expenses. Then she takes one look at his trembling hands and realizes he is actually penniless. She tells him to just keep the money, because he clearly needs it more than she does. Ada is being surprisingly kind. She offers him a spare room and meals until he gets back on his feet. Mess. Having a woman this close to him is more terrifying than the forest. Their moment is cut short when another patient arrives. A staff member calls for Ada, and she rushes off to handle the new emergency. She tells him to take it easy and not push himself too hard. Junpei stands there, completely drained from the stress of the day. He checks his pockets and counts his last few coins. He only has 2,200 gal left to his name. He enters the shared ward to find his bed. He has no idea how much things cost in this world, but he knows he has to be smart with his money. He finally sits down and takes a breath. Surviving the forest in a thin robe was a mistake. His first priority is buying actual armor. He lies back trying to calm his racing heart. He cannot afford to rush into another disaster. He needs to play it safe. For now, the clinic is his only sanctuary. He will stay here until he is strong enough to face the world again. Peace and quiet did not last long. A massive lion beastman burst into laughter, claiming his injuries were nothing but a minor scratch. Junpei froze. This clinic was supposed to be his safe haven, but he was currently sharing a ward with a literal monster. Ada was not having any of it. She reminded the warrior that his arm was nearly torn off and ordered him to stay still and rest. Junpei ducked under the covers, wishing he could just disappear. The beastman kept waving his mangled arm around, insisting it was already back in one piece. The warrior even asked for some weight training equipment while recovering. Junpei could not believe this reckless man was actually a fellow patient. Eventually, the shouting stopped and silence filled the dark room, but the lion adventurer was clearly not a fan of sitting still. A sudden roar shattered the peace. The beastman screamed that he was dying of boredom, nearly giving Junpei a heart attack. Ida finally stepped in and ordered Garas to be quiet and go to sleep. Junpei realized that if he wanted any real rest, he needed to find a place of his own. Junpei did not get a single second of sleep. That loud lion beastman made it impossible to rest. He decides to sneak out to the guild and grab a quest before the monster wakes up. The sun rises over the distant snowy peaks. It is a new day and Junpei is finally back on the move. Walking through the woods with Undyne, he realizes he needs a real plan. He has to start making smart moves if he wants to survive this world. Getting back to his own world is the long-term goal. But right now he has two urgent problems. He needs to pay off his debt as fast as possible. And even more importantly, he needs his own space. He is determined to rent a private room, no matter how small it is. To him, the night at the clinic was an absolute nightmare. The constant noise and chaos from the other patients were exhausting. He knows he cannot put up with that kind of environment forever. His social anxiety is hitting its absolute limit. In his mind, fighting a pack of goblins is actually easier than dealing with that loud beastman. He prepares himself to face the forest once again. He needs a sanctuary. Somewhere he can finally be alone and away from the chaos of the clinic. After some hard work, he counts his earnings. 22,000 gal is a solid start, but his mana is already hitting the limit. Suddenly, a loud noise echoes through the trees. Something big is moving just ahead. Junpei and Undyne quickly duck behind a massive rock. He stays as quiet as possible to avoid being spotted. He peeks out to find a pack of gray wolves. They look far more dangerous than any goblin he has encountered. But the wolves are not alone. A professional adventuring party is already standing their ground, ready for a fight. Junpei watches in silence. This is the first time he has ever seen real combat from the sidelines. Watching a veteran party in the middle of a life or death battle is a total wake-up call. This is how the pros survive. From his hiding spot on the cliff, Junpei watches a rookie party take on a pack of gray wolves. Lizardman steps into the front line, using a taunt skill to draw the attention of the beasts. The wolves lunge forward, aiming their entire attack directly at the armored lizardman. He slams his massive shield into the lead wolf to kill its momentum. The beasts are completely focused on the tank, leaving them open for a counterattack. Meanwhile, Egan stays back and waits for the perfect opening to strike. He carefully counts his steps while closing the distance to the target. The wolf snarls as it prepares to strike, but the swordsman is already in position. Keith realizes his cover is blown. The wolf spots him before he can land a clean strike, forcing him to change his strategy on the fly. Keith shouts for Egon to stay focused. The lizardman takes a hit to his side, but he brushes it off as a minor scratch while holding the line. Behind the front line, their mage is starting to crack under the pressure. The intensity of the battle is more than she expected. She struggles to aim her staff. The wolves are moving way too fast for her to lock onto a single target, leaving the party without magic support. From the cliffs, Junpei notices a major problem. These gray wolves are much stronger than the goblins he dealt with earlier. Egon tries to bait the monsters into another head-on attack. He taunts the beasts, hoping to keep their focus on his heavy shield. But the wolves have a different plan. They stop their assault and let out a coordinated howl that echoes through the trees. Egon realizes the situation just turned deadly. The monsters are not retreating, they are calling for their entire pack to join the hunt. Keith hears the call to stop holding back. It is time for the party to get serious and use their combat skills to survive the pack. Keith does not hesitate for a single second. He lunges forward with a shout, trusting his tank to keep the pressure off him. He triggers his power slash skill. The blade cuts through the air with enough force to put the lead wolf down for good. The swordsman is already breathing hard from the intensity of the fight. He catches his breath and immediately looks for his next target. The two adventurers coordinate their movements perfectly. They move into a pincer formation to trap the remaining monster between them. From the safety of the cliff, Junpei is genuinely impressed. He admits their teamwork is on a totally different level, but something suddenly catches his eye. A group of goblins emerges from the shadows. Junpei realizes the wolf howls did not just call the pack, they attracted even more monsters to the area. Egon shouts for the elf mage Karen to keep her magic in reserve. They are trying to save their mana, but the situation is getting worse by the second. Karen is completely exposed. A goblin is right behind her with its spear leveled, and she has no idea she is about to be turned into a pincushion. High on the cliff, Junpei nearly loses his cool. He wants to scream a warning, but exposing his position now could make the entire situation much worse. The monster lunges forward for the kill. Karen finally senses the danger at the last second, but she is way too slow to react to the surprise ambush. Out of nowhere, a blade of pressurized water slices through the air. It intercepts the goblin mid-air and knocks it back with massive force. A second water strike catches the other monster off guard. Corinne stands frozen, watching the creature scream from an attack she did not even cast. She finally snaps out of her shock and raises her staff. She unleashes a massive fire spear that turns the remaining goblins into literal charcoal. As the dust settles, the mage is left gasping for air. She looks around the empty woods in a total daze, trying to figure out who just saved her life. Up on the rocks, Junpei stands tall with Undyne at his side. He played his part perfectly, acting as a hidden guardian while the rookies survived another day. Karen is left in a total daze as the smoke clears. She looks up and sees her mysterious savior standing right there. Junpei immediately panics because they just made eye contact. Karen tries to ask what happened, but his social anxiety is already screaming at him to run. He does not stick around for a thank you. He tells her to get back to town before things get messy and vanishes into the brush as fast as his legs can carry him. Back on the main path, Keith and Egon inspect the dead wolves. They realize the situation was way over their heads, and that someone was definitely backing them up from the shadows. The party knows they need to thank this person properly. But first, they have to hurry with the butchering before the scent of blood brings even more monsters to their location. Egon admits that his skills are running low and they are hitting their limit. Keith agrees, suggesting they grab their loot and head back for some actual food. Karen offers to keep a lookout while the guys work. Above them, the strange moons of this new world remind them just how far from home they really are. From his hiding spot, Junpei watches them work together. He realizes that having a party really keeps things stable, even if he is not ready to join one just yet. He watches their moves closely. They are only using basic starting skills like taunt and power slash. Judging by their performance, they are probably just E or F rank rookies. Watching them makes Junpei realize his own limits. He knows he needs more summons to really make an impact, but he has no clue how to actually get them. He thinks back to the gacha system from his old gaming days. He was told he could pull again eventually, but there is no timer telling him when that will be. He wonders how normal summoners in this world even function. Without a lucky game mechanic, how do they find and bind new spirits to their will? Even if he did get lucky, his low level is a huge bottleneck. His current cost limit is only 5, meaning a powerful C-rank monster would be impossible to control right now. To make matters worse, he cannot even see his own status bar. He has no way to check his MP reserve or confirm if he has leveled up at all. Later, Junpei heads back to the city to cash in his loot. The guild pays him over 21,000 gale for the 3 goblins he took down. The receptionist tells him he will hit E rank in no time, but the social interaction is killing him. He desperately wishes this world had the internet so he could just file his reports online. The guild receptionist suggests he check out the local summoners guild next. She believes it is the best place for someone with his rare abilities to grow. The idea catches Junpei off guard. He had no idea a specialized organization for his class even existed in the city. The receptionist asks if he has checked out the local summoner guild yet. Junpei is caught off guard. He had no idea a specialized place for his class even existed in this town. She explains that adventurers can join multiple guilds at once. From warriors to mages, every class has a dedicated spot to grow and train. These specialized guilds offer a way to learn new skills for a price. This is the first real lead Junpei has found on how to finally get stronger. She mentions that he might also stumble upon some life-saving information while he is there. This is his chance. If he can learn how to rank up his summons or increase his total count, he can finally stop relying on luck and survive this world. The receptionist marks the guild location on a map and tells him to head over whenever he is ready. Junpei still cannot handle a real conversation. He holds up a piece of paper with one final question written on it so he does not have to speak. The woman smiles and answers his note directly. She tells him she is currently single and is a surprisingly good cook. That was way too much information for Junpei to handle. He is currently having a total social meltdown after that comment. To escape the awkwardness, he quickly scribbles a new question. He needs to know where he can actually buy some MP potions. The receptionist points him toward the Alchemist's Guild. However, she warns him that mana recovery is not exactly cheap. Junpei needs to know the damage. He holds up another note asking for the specific price of a single bottle. She drops the bomb. Even a basic low-grade potion will cost him about 20,000 gale. Junpei is absolutely floored. That is basically his entire paycheck from those 3 goblins gone in a single gulp. He realizes this world is way more hardcore than his old games. He cannot just chug mana drinks like water anymore. He starts to head out but suddenly stops. Something about the situation finally clicks in his head. Before Junpei can make his escape, he gets intercepted. The loud adventurers from before are back, and they are way too excited to see him alive. Even the guild receptionist is getting in on the hype. She claims she knew he was a winner all along, though her smile looks a bit intense. The Mohawk adventurer wastes no time. He officially invites Junpei to join their party, even though they were supposedly looking for a regular mage yesterday. He admits that after seeing Junpei in action, he decided summoners are actually way more useful than boring mages. This is exactly the kind of social pressure Junpei cannot handle. He tries to bolt for the door, begging them to just leave him alone. But he does not get very far. A massive hand grabs his cloak and Junpei is suddenly stuck in place. No matter how hard he pulls, the mountain of a man behind him does not move an inch. Junpei is officially trapped in this awkward situation. In his desperate attempt to flee, he ends up crashing straight into another group. This time, he finds himself face to face with a rookie elf mage and her lizardman teammate. Junpei and the elf lock eyes, both frozen in total shock after their collision. She suddenly bows her head low and thanks him for his help earlier that day. Junpei is completely lost. He has no memory of ever meeting this girl before. The rest of her party steps up, offering to return the favor whenever he needs it. That kindness quickly turns into a shouting match. Every veteran in the room starts fighting over who gets to recruit him first. The guild receptionist stops the riot before it starts. She holds up a cold reminder that fighting on the premises leads to a permanent ban. The rookies take the hint and start heading out. The lizardman waves a casual goodbye while Junpei stands there in a daze. Just before she disappears, the elf turns back with a bright red face. She tells him her name is Karen, and Junpei finally hits his social limit. But Karen is not letting him off the hook easily. She bows deeply and insists on treating him to a meal to show her gratitude. The receptionist decides to stir the pot. She calls it a dinner date, making the situation 1,000 times more awkward. That is the final straw for his social battery. Junpei bolts for the exit as the receptionist jokingly asks to be invited along next time. After successfully escaping the crowd, Junpei heads toward a different part of town to find a very specific location. He checks his map one last time to make sure he is in the right spot. He finally arrives at the Summoners Guild, but it looks more like an abandoned shack than a professional organization. Despite the sketchy exterior, he needs answers on how to rank up Undyne and increase his total number of summons. He takes a deep breath to steady his nerves. He has to survive yet another social interaction with a complete stranger. Junpei nervously peeks through the door, praying the guildmaster isn't some terrifying old man. Instead of a seasoned veteran, he finds a young boy with glasses sitting behind a mountain of paperwork. Junpei can hardly believe his eyes. The person in charge is basically just a child. The boy suddenly stands up, frantically asking if Junpei is actually a summoner. A wave of relief washes over the kid, as if he just found his long-awaited savior. He apologizes for the sudden pressure, but he seems desperate for Junpei to stay. The boy makes a shocking proposal, asking Junpei to take over his position as guild master tomorrow. Junpei can only stand there in total shock. His social battery just hit 0. Yuri starts dumping stacks of paperwork on the desk. He explains that all the job details are ready and expects Junpei to start meeting the local contacts immediately. Junpei shuts that down fast, shaking his head until he is dizzy. Yuri finally slows down and realizes he forgot to even introduce himself. The kid introduces himself as Yuri. He confirms that he is indeed the master of this town's summoner guild. Junpei is losing his mind. He cannot believe a child is actually running a professional organization. Yuri admits the situation is desperate. The old master passed away recently, and since there were no other summoners left, the job fell to him by default. After the heavy explanation, Yuri stops to ask who he is actually talking to. Junpei just stares back in silence, still trying to process the madness. Yuri takes a look at the guild card and reads the name Junpei out loud. Even though it is a low-rank card, the kid looks incredibly hopeful. He suddenly bows and begs Junpei to take charge of the guild. Junpei tries to back away, but it is clear there is no escaping this mess. Yuri is being a bit dramatic. He tells Junpei that if he does not take over, he will probably be dead by tomorrow. That is a massive leap even for a mess like this. Junpei panics, asking what on earth the kid is talking about. Yuri gives him a sad look. He asks Junpei to just hear him out since they share the same rare class. It turns out the guild has been on life support for a long time. The former master Egmont was once horrified to learn the state was cutting their funding. He tried to fight back against the decision, but the bureaucrats did not care about his pleas. The officials were cold and calculated. They told him the guild simply was not meeting the required performance standards. In this world, money follows results. If the summoners cannot prove their worth to the state, the subsidies dry up immediately. The data was undeniable. While the warriors and mages were thriving, the summoner guild could not even reach the bare minimum threshold. Egmont tried to defend his guild, insisting they completed every single job they received. The official acknowledged their hard work, but he pointed out a much bigger problem. The records showed that the summoners had delivered 0 mana stones to the state. Egmont was stunned, realizing he had completely overlooked the value of those resources. Mana stones were the backbone of society, powering everything from street lamps to kitchen appliances. The government only funded guilds that contributed to the national supply chain. Egmont tried to argue that their value came from combat, but the officials were not listening. To the bureaucrats, the rules were absolute and the guild had simply failed to perform. The bureaucrats issued a final warning. If they did not produce enough mana stones by the next audit, the guild building would be seized and their taxes would triple. Egmont was frozen in fear. They were already struggling to survive, and a blow like this would destroy everything he worked for. The officials left without a hint of mercy. Yuri could only watch in silence as the weight of the guild's survival fell onto his master's shoulders. Back in the present, Junpei finally understood why mana stones mattered so much. If they failed to meet the quota, their home and their funding would disappear forever. Yuri stared ahead with a hollow look in his eyes. With such a brutal ultimatum hanging over their heads, they were forced into a corner. Years ago, Egmont and a young Yuri headed into the forest to hunt. They had to prove their worth to the state, no matter the cost.